Hi, I'm Emily. In this video, I'm going to show you some different ways to approach the closing sequence of the Ashtanga practice. So different ways to do shoulder stand, headstand, and the last three seated poses. Let's start with shoulder stand. Instead of doing the full shoulder stand sequence, you could just do the legs up the wall. So how that looks is you're going to want to grab a block, come onto your back, press up to a bridge, slide the block underneath the sacrum, so where the tag of your pants is, and then lift the legs up. Now you could also go to a wall and rest the legs on the wall, placing the sacrum on a block or a bolster. So if you're in an Ashtanga class, you can just stay here the whole time the teacher is cueing the shoulder stand sequence. So this is your first variation. Maybe you close your eyes. And if you're in an Ashtanga class, the shoulder stand sequence takes a bit of time. So you would be here for quite a while. Some other options that you could do is after the shoulder stand, you could come off your block, and then instead of a plow pose, you could bring your legs towards you, kind of in a reclined forward fold. Instead of Karnapidasana, which I'll show in a moment, you could come here and just hug the legs in. Maybe you even round up. The next part of the shoulder stand sequence is Urdhva Padmasana. So maybe you cross the legs, or you could even work on a lotus or half lotus here, thinking about engaging your core, pressing the legs away. And then the last part of the sequence, Pindasana, you could just hug the crossed legs in. Now I've also seen some students do like a figure 4 stretch here to work on the hip opening for the lotus, the Padmasana. So that's another really great option. And then the counter pose for shoulder stand is fish or Matsyasana. So to come into that, you would keep your legs crossed, press down into your elbows, lift the chest up, and then the head can hang back. You could also place your head on a block. For Uttana Padasana, I would just extend the legs and keep the back straight down on the mat. So you could be here, or you could be here. So another way to work on shoulder stand is to use the wall. And I'll first show what legs up the wall can look like at the wall with a bolster, and then how you could start working on shoulder stand. So slide the bolster all the way up to the wall, and then come on your bolster sideways. Start to spin around, and then let the torso rest down. So here is your legs up. This is another option using the wall. To start exploring shoulder stand, you can bend your legs, press your feet into the wall to start lifting the hips. You can play around with bringing the feet a little bit higher. You could play around with the arms supporting the back. And maybe you lift one leg up at a time, and just starting to explore your shoulder stand. Engaging the core, the glutes, the legs to help you find that line. To come out of legs up the wall, you would roll over onto your side and then press up. So for shoulder stand is how to use blankets. So you would want them folded like so, so that you have enough space for your shoulders. You want to make sure that the clean edge of the blanket is where your shoulders would go. So the fringe side or the uneven folded side would point in. Blankets can be really good to help give you a little bit more space. You also want to be able to protect your neck. So if you ever do a shoulder stand and you feel pain on the neck should never be on the mat. So that's where the blankets can come in to give you a little bit more space. And when you come in to your blankets, you don't want to lay back too far back, because as I start to bring my legs over, I'm starting to roll off the blankets. So you want the shoulders to be on the blankets and the head and neck to be off the blankets. So you might have to start a couple inches in from the edge of the blanket. And then I like to set up in a plow pose first. Now, if you can't get the feet all the way over, you could place a block behind you for your feet. A chair could also work. Inhale, coming up. I like to interlace my hands, walk the shoulders under, and then place my hands to the back and start to lift the legs. In Ashtanga, you would stay here anywhere from 10 to 15 breaths. Usually in a lead class, I'll count for 10. And then the other poses would be 8 breaths. So the next pose after your shoulder stand, Salamba Sarvangasana, is Halasana, plow pose. Hands interlace. Again, if the feet don't touch, you could place the feet on a block or a chair. 8 breaths would be here. And then Pindasana, ear pressure pose. Feet stay together, knees on either side of the ears. 8 breaths here. As you inhale, after 8 breaths, you bring your hands back to your back, come up to shoulder stand. Find a lotus pose. And you might have to go one hand at a time to grab the feet. If lotus isn't in your practice, cross the legs. Hands can stay here on the back, or Urdhva Padmasana, hands can come towards the knees, thinking about pressing the legs away as the legs press down into the arms. Core is active here. 8 breaths would be here. And then Pindasana, you would hug this in, wrap the arms around the legs. 8 breaths there, arms by your sides, and then you would slowly roll out, coming right into your Matsyasana. Although you might, if you have the blankets, move those out to the side. If you were in the lotus, you would stay in lotus. Come onto the elbows, come onto the top of the head, and then hands come to your thighs. 8 breaths here. And then 8 breaths in Utthana Padasana. You stay on the top of the head and extend the legs and the arms. 8 steady breaths. And then you release. You would roll up and take a vinyasa and work on headstand. One last thing I'll show for shoulder stand. So I'll show it without the blankets and talk about where we're placing our hands. So either come right into shoulder stand, or like I mentioned, I like plow pose first to really interlace my hands and get my shoulders under. When you're starting, it's okay to put the hands lower and even be in this kind of piped position. Over time, you want to try to engage the core, the legs to straighten up, and see if you can bring your hands higher up, closer to your shoulder blades. This was key for me to find comfort in the pose. You also want to think about your elbows in line with your shoulders, so not having your arms be out here. And that's why I like the plow pose to set up. So again, it's 10 breaths here or more. 8 in Halasana. Feet are together. Toes pointed. You're on the tops of the feet. 10 breaths in Karnapidasana, or 8 breaths rather. Hands come to the back, and then right into your lotus pose. Urdhva Padmasana for 8. Pindasana for 8. Rolling out slowly to Matsyasana for 8. If you're in lotus, you grab the feet. And then Uttana Padasana for 8. After your vinyasa, from downward facing dog, you'll come forward onto your knees to set up for Shirsasana, headstand. Our first variation, though, is going to be dolphin. So we won't put any pressure on the head today. Come on down to the elbows. Grab the outsides of the arms, so that's where you want your elbows to be, and then interlace the hands together. Come into dolphin. So it's just like your downward facing dog. You might have to have the legs bent here. Think about pressing down into the elbows, shoulders pushing up towards the ceiling, and you can relax the neck here. So this is dolphin. I once had a teacher that said, hold this for 25 breaths before even working on headstand. So this might be a place that you stay. You can play around with working on straightening the legs. You can play around with walking the feet closer, and you see my hips start to shift forward. So that's going to give you more of an inversion. Another thing you could play around with is putting your feet on a block to help you get more of that feel for the inversion. Really think about pressing the elbows down. You can also play around with one leg up at a time for a 3-legged dolphin. The counter pose would be child's pose. I personally like the arms back behind me. That feels better on my shoulders, but see what works best for you. If you're starting to work on headstand, doing it by a wall can be nice so that it can catch you. You could also play around with that block again. If you're working headstand, my tip is to first do that same setup, and then the hands can either be together or apart. So you can cradle the head. This is how I used to do it for years. Lately, I've been bringing my hands together and as a fist. So different ways to do it. For me, this gives me more stability in my forearms. This also can be useful for people who have long forearms. So they're just different kind of methods that you can play around with. But before you place your head down, I want you to lift the hips up, come into dolphin, and find your stability and strength there before you even place the head down. Most of the weight should be in your arms. So find that nice, strong dolphin pose, and then bring your head down. You don't want to be rounding here. So if you find you're there, you might want to come back to your dolphin. Some things to work on: one thigh in towards the chest, and then switch. Maybe you come into a little egg shape. If you keep your thighs into the chest, it's going to keep the pelvis tucked. It's going to help so you don't flip over. And that uses a ton of core strength there too, so that's a good place to start. You want to avoid kicking up into headstand because that can give you too much momentum and then you can fall over. If you were going to fall out, you would tuck and roll. That would be how you would want to come out of it. But that's why doing it by a wall can be nice. So like my teacher said, you can just stay in dolphin, work up to 25 breaths. It's a lot of breaths. So feel free to stay there to start. For the last 3 seated poses, they are traditionally done in the lotus, but that's not accessible for a lot of people. So crossing the legs is going to be a good place to start. If the hips are tight and your knees are higher than your hips, then I would suggest you sit up on a blanket or a bolster. All right, so what are props? I'll show sitting up on the blankets. I'll just use my shoulder stand blankets. So I have a few blocks here. You could always prop your knees up with your blocks. So that's one option. And then the first one is a forward fold yoga mudra, so you could rest the head on the block. You take the arms around the back, but try not to just bring them back there. Really reach around the back, opening up the shoulders. Maybe you grab opposite elbows. Inhale to lengthen, and then exhale to fold. 10 steady breaths here. Now, if this block is too low for the head, then you're up here. You could always just stay here, or if you have more blocks, you can stack your blocks so that you have a height where you can lower the forehead down. So after 10 slow breaths here, you would come up into Padmasana. I like to cue reversing the cross of the legs, or if you're in a half lotus, then work the other side. Extend the arms, bring the thumb and index finger together, glue your other 3 fingers together, tuck the chin, gaze towards the tip of the nose. Nice tall spine here. Really slowing these breaths down. You would do 10 breaths here as well. Inhale to release. The last pose is Utputihi, or pick up and lift. So you would want to come off whatever you were sitting on, but you would want to grab 2 blocks. You can do this in cross legs, or if you can do a half lotus or a full lotus, that will make you more compact, actually make it easier to lift, but don't do that to the sacrifice of your knees. So I'll show how to lift with the cross legs first. Blocks in front of the hips. You want to find protraction of your shoulder blades, so shoulder blades separate. You want to lift as you inhale. So it's 10 breaths here. You could keep the feet down and really work on this protraction. You could also play around with lifting one foot for a few breaths and then the other one, or maybe both of your feet lift. When you're lifting, play around with the position of your blocks. If they're too far back, notice how I can't get as high, I can't protract my shoulders here. So they gotta come forward, and I'm thinking sending my hips back, protracting my shoulders. So I'm finding like a cat spine. Other options, so working that half lotus. For lotus, I like to close my knee joint first, find my rotation, like external rotation of the hip, and then bringing your foot by that hip crease. So this would be a half lotus. And you could be here or here. And then full lotus is both of the legs. In Ashtanga, it's always the right leg first, and then the left leg for your lotus. And if you are taking lotus for Utputaki, you want your feet in front of your arms. And you want to think about lifting your knees up. All right. So those are some different ways to approach the closing sequence in Ashtanga. If you have any more specific questions, feel free to ask. Hopefully at some point I'll do more of a tutorial on headstand if that's something you're interested in learning how to actually get fully upside down. As I like to say, we use structure to create steadiness and consistency to build confidence. I'll see you on your mat soon.